It's the Sports Hour, the Flow Sports Hour on this Monday evening, and joining me in the studio to talk about the A-League, we've got our World Game guru, Ellis Galios. Ellis, how are you today? You have a good 4-day break?
Yeah, I'm really refreshed, Clayton, actually, and it's been good. Just a few days out, spending it with my cousins from Greece and trying to explain the difficult nature of, what football's like in Australia to them and them not really understanding it. So that was interesting, but all ready to go again for another week here with you.
That does explain why we've had to be quiet around him today. I think he's a bit, it happens, folks, when you've had a really big weekend, you need to have a quiet Monday. So we'll just talk quietly, not too loudly at the moment. All right, okay, enough of that. Now the A-League. Let's just start with the game yesterday. Adelaide United and Melbourne City. And I just remember looking at my phone, seeing the score come through that it was 3-1, thinking, yes, we're doing this. And then it took ages later, and then I saw the result was a draw. And one of the reasons for that length of time was a very nasty injury that happened.
It was a horrific injury, and it's completely overshadowed basically every detail of the game. It ended up being a 6-goal game, so it's unfortunate. But the player from Adelaide United, Juande, the midfielder, went down in what didn't look in real time to be an overly sort of big coming together of players in a physical way, resulted in one of the most horrific looking legs that I've seen. Basically, the leg was bent in completely the opposite way that it should. And there lay Juande, just looking around.
His knee was facing north and his foot was facing south, basically.
Pretty well. So we'll leave it to the imagination of people that want to really sort of envision how it looked. But effectively what we had was this really weird situation of Melbourne City's team of physios and emergency crew on the ground there basically rushing to the aid of the Adelaide United player and just putting white towels around him. And everyone just sort of sat there not really knowing what was going on. Usually we're accustomed to seeing the ambulance drive straight onto the pitch, and we saw no ambulance. So it emerged that the ambulance had to be called and did not come until 15 minutes after it was called, which then meant that by the time the ambulance was allowed to come on the pitch, I believe there was something going on with the pitch whereby they hadn't cleared the ambulance in the way that they're meant to at AAMI Park, and there was an issue there. Anyway, by the time the ambulance got onto the pitch, we are now looking at about 35 minutes in between play. Wow. So that's, for a game of high intensity, it's a high-tempo game, football.
A national game we're talking about here.
Correct, and a National League game. That's really difficult for players. There's only so much warming up you can do. So you saw all these weird scenes of the players just sort of standing around looking. And again, no one knew what was going on. Now, in the fallout, we've since learned that given Victoria has this ramping crisis, a lot of states do, but it's particularly bad in Victoria, shortage of ambulances on the ground. It meant that Daniel Andrews and the Andrews government of Victoria basically got rid of the regulation that every professional sporting event needs to have an ambulance on standby.
And that includes like AFL, we're talking everything?
It does. So obviously AFL, they I believe, funded it well enough to make sure that they've got ambulances on the ground. Again, we don't really know because we haven't tested the situation since the regulations were revoked. But, and again, I'm not completely across the legalities. It's not my state. So I dare say some listeners who are hearing this will probably be screaming at the radio saying, that's not exactly true. But as we understand it, so you don't need to have an ambulance on standby at a professional sporting event anymore in Victoria. That's due to the nature of the ramping. So we got this incident come out. Now, there's two arguments to this, Clayton. One is, obviously it's a horrendous look. I mean, the player's gone down. I mean, past players were looking into this, and there was an interesting tweet actually made by Michael Moroney, who said, nothing's really changed. I broke my leg in Adelaide and an ambulance never even came on that occasion. My dad dropped me to hospital. This is a professional player. Players weighing in, though, saying, this is shocking. How can this be? Yada, yada, yada. The other argument is that, obviously, you're not really going to have players in these environments being endangered in terms of their actual lives, whereas people out on the streets are in that danger. And so rightfully, perhaps that's where the priority lies at the moment in Victoria.
I can get that. And it's only ever an issue when something like this happens and we say, why isn't there one there? That's the only time. I mean, for me, I was under the understanding that it was required that all, professional national sporting games, there was an ambulance there or, St. John's or first aid of that level immediately. If there's been a change, the first thing that comes to mind is it's got to come down to money and a money issue as well as not enough ambos and that. But that's getting on the political side of it, so we don't need to get into that. But this is something I think that they need to relook at because it's never an issue until you need it, and that's basically it. But it's not a good look for the sport, and it's not a good look all round.
Well, touch wood, it's never going to happen. It has happened in football before, but I mean, all you need is a player to have a cardiac arrest, and with no ambulance around, you could be looking at one of the worst situations in the world unfolding, and it would be an unforgivable circumstance if that were to occur. So,
well, I'm looking at the time here, and it was at the 67-minute mark, and it was 3-2. The game ended up being a 3-3 draw, and it was a cliffhanger. Well, you still get those games that come down to the wire, and that gets people's blood pumping, and that could be another issue. So even a spectator could be someone that is in need of medical attention. So I think they really do need to look at this.
Absolutely. Well, it's really put this issue under the spotlight now, this incident. So I dare say it'll be hashed out throughout the week in the media. I'm sure it'll come up in Parliament as well in Victoria, knowing the way things work. So we'll keep tabs on it, but it was certainly difficult to watch, especially in the moment, having no idea what was going on. We're, really sort of on edge, waiting for the sideline reporters to bring us up to date on exactly why we were breaking for so long in this game. It affected the game. There's no question about it.
Absolutely.
And people are going to say, well, maybe there's some Adelaide bias coming out. But when you're waiting 35 minutes for a game to restart, the intensity's gone out the window, and then you suddenly find yourself trying to sort of, reestablish what the tone was, and exactly right. And, tactically as well, it's a massive reshuffle. In the end, 3-3, drop points for Adelaide United will feel more like a win for Melbourne City. They were fortunate to get a penalty with 5 minutes left to play or so. But, in the end, Adelaide throw away a 2-goal lead, which is pretty costly when you're coming into finals at this late point in the season, Clayton.
It is. All right, we'll leave it there with that. But the other thing, just touching back on this issue with the ambulances, I know in country sport games we've seen injuries happen, and my understanding was that at least like the local volunteers were there from St. John's or from SA Ambulance. I'm not sure what happens in Victoria and New South Wales, but I think it's something we need to look at because we've seen some very nasty injuries happen. Okay, that was an A-league game, but we've seen them happen in country footy and netball. I've heard the screams of a girl when her ankle is same sort of thing. So we need to look into this and find out how much of an issue it's going to be going forward.
Well, it's just the safety of mind, isn't it? Not knowing that there is risk, whether it's professional or not, there's risk, right?
And there's a cost, but we've got to find a way to make...
Correct.
Yeah, to try and circumvent all things. Because sporting, and for a lot of them, it's volunteers, and they're out there, but on a professional level, that's another thing. All right, Ellis, thank you for that. We'll see how you go with other things during the week, and we look forward to you being on the Sport Show back on Friday.
Good to be with you, Clayton. Thank you.